So I'm going to preface this question with my remembrances of 2017 and the politics following the 2016 election, the first Trump election. Lisa Goodman, in reaction to not getting DFL endorsed, posted on Facebook about how, hey, we're all Democrats here. We need to unite in fighting against Trump. Basically, like, why are you running against me? Why are you challenging me? The real enemy is Trump. And so I start that way because I thought that was ridiculous. And but like, I am kind of craving a come together. Like, can we get along and work together and like hold hands? Like, this is how traumatized I feel right now. I want some hand holding and some feel good moments. And so when I watched yesterday's council meeting, it's like, oh no, they still hate each other. So
We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
this is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Joining me today is Ward 2 Council Member Robin Wonsley. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
I have to warn you, I'm wiped out. I feel awful. I sincerely thought, talking to you today, that I would just be crying at you for 30 minutes. That's really sincerely how bad I felt. And I haven't had a lot of human interaction since the election. So prepare for me to dump all over you. I don't know how much human interaction you've had. You've had at least one council meeting, but
I've had therapy also, so I'm in good spirits.
Oh, you have?
Oh yes, absolutely. That was the first thing I did yesterday. I was like, therapy? You're available? Thank you, sis. All right.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're feeling okay?
I'm actually feeling, and I know this is, contrary to how a lot of folks are feeling. It's similar to like what you're experiencing, which is, and it's justifiable, just like this mass shock of we're in this reality again somehow, and we know presidential elections are kind of a temperature check on like what is the state of the world, essentially, both politically, economically, like where are our fellow neighbors kind of situating themselves in relationship to many of the various problems that we're experiencing or many of the good things that we're trying to advance. And Tuesday's election was absolutely like, what the hell is this? And people are feeling justifiably afraid. It's okay to feel uncertain about what is coming next. And also a sense of hypervigilance around how do I protect and care for my loved ones who I know will likely bear the brunt of whatever level of violence this administration decides to exert on a daily basis towards a different demographic of our populace. And so I get all those feels. And if anyone knows me, like, I think the reason why I feel not in like this deep pit of despair is one, therapy, but also like I'm a faith believer. Like I have to rely on my relationship with God in this moment, as I've had to do with working inside of City Hall, where we experienced a microscopic version of this in 2021, where we thought, we were on the precipice of transformative change following the uprising. And then we saw the election results of how the conservative wing of the Democratic Party just took hold over our city. And we saw progressive representation become a minority like figure point in our local political landscape. And we all was like, what the hell is this? Like that was unexpected. and going into just a hostile political climate just almost 4 years ago, it was my faith that had to carry me every step of the way, where things felt so bad. And we had an administration that every single day also figured out how to choose violence to a particular community or to enact on a particular community, using their political authority. And also as a woman of color, like a Black woman, having to navigate that space as an independent and all that. Like, I wanted to give up. I was in so many spaces of just despair that entire first term. I cried every single day. And this is before I had a deep relationship with God. I felt exactly like how you feel and how the rest of everyone is feeling right now. And it really took me relying on my faith and relying on a community, and our resilience to organize through all apocalyptic conditions, especially like folks of color. Like if you're indigenous, if you're Black, like, you know what it's like to live through apocalyptic conditions, to survive genocidal conditions, especially for our Palestinian relatives. And we have had to figure shit out every step of the way. And I think that is my ultimate faith of like, we're going to figure this out one way or another, because what other choice do we have?
Right. I was thinking this morning, preparing for this conversation, like I am exhausted. Before this election, I was feeling like I'm at the end of my rope. We've been through so much as a country, as a city, the 2016 election, COVID, the murder of George Floyd, Minneapolis especially has been through a lot. And now we're dealing with this. We haven't had a rest. We haven't had a rest from crisis. It's been one thing after the other. And now we've got to look ahead to 4 years of, as you said yesterday in a council meeting, basically everything we hold dear as priorities either being cut, defunded, attacked in some way. Not to bring us down again. You've decided you are positive, but like that's what we're looking forward to.
No, and I guess where I feel situated in this space of, I feel very grateful to be in a position of power in our political landscape where we have had to advance things in hostile political conditions under Democrat governance. I mean, we all know like the Frye administration has not been the most friendly towards moving things around environmental justice. An example of like the 10-year fight around the East Phillips urban farm. We have faced resistance on labor struggles. Example there, the Uber and Lyft fight just to get rideshare drivers, a $15 minimum wage. We have had to fight tooth and nail to even advance the most bare minimum measures to support our unhoused neighbors. Example of giving $1.5 million to Agate shelter, housing, to make sure we're protecting even the limited supply of transitional housing or supportive housing that we have. And we faced pushback from this administration. So I feel like Minneapolis, because it's constantly a war zone, like you said, and this might be wholeheartedly like a PTSD response of like, when have we not ever lived in the moments of crisis here in Minneapolis under what's supposed to be, better political conditions? This is supposed to be the liberal bits. In fact, the nation was looking at us because of the VP selection of Tim Walz as this like progressive beacon of change. And John, you and I definitely know, as you mentioned, like we have been a site of global struggle following, the public execution of George Floyd. Our city leadership or our state leadership in many ways didn't get all the things right in response to COVID. And from that, we've had one political crisis after another, even at this local level. So it could be of like being in the belly of the beast of the political struggle here in Minneapolis in some way has felt like, oh, this is prepping ground for the shifts that we're we're going to be either seeing at a national level or that we're currently experiencing at the national level. And I think I feel very, let me not say fortunate, I don't take lightly this responsibility that now as a elected official on the municipal level, we are going to be once again, as we saw in 2016, on the front lines of defense for both pushing back against the reactionary and violence actions of the Trump administration to protect our residents and their civil liberties. But also, we're going to have to counter push back and not just be put in this reactionary space and have to boldly advance. It's not even progressive values. These are just normal day things. People should have nice things like clean air. People should have public housing and affordable housing. People should have access to fresh produce. These are things that are not extremists, unlike Trump and all the Minneapolis will have you believe. But like, these are things that we should absolutely fight for boldly in spite of a Trump administration. I know we've done it before, and we can do it again.
So I'm going to preface this question with my remembrances of 2017 and the politics following the 2016 election, the first Trump election. And my friend was running for city council in Ward 7 against Lisa Goodman and had blocked the DFL endorsement that year. And so Lisa Goodman, in reaction to not getting DFL endorsed, posted on Facebook about how, hey, we're all Democrats here. We need to unite in fighting against Trump. Basically, like, why are you running against me? Why are you challenging me? The real enemy is Trump. And so I start that way because I thought that was ridiculous. And but like, I am kind of craving a come together. Like, can we get along and work together and like hold hands? Like, this is how traumatized I feel right now. I want some hand holding and some feel good moments. And so when I watched yesterday's council meeting, it's like, oh no, they still hate each other. So how do you think there's a chance of the atmosphere at City Hall changing at all? Because I've been thinking mayoral council relations are worse than ever. And there's some people in the council who don't really get along as well. Like, it's not a great working environment. So do you feel like some of those relationships have a chance of changing, or is it just, it's too far gone?
So what I will encourage, John, is like the comment you mentioned of like, we all hate each other. And I get like the craving amongst like us potentially watching the very fragile framework of civil society just collapsing in front of us. There is this craving to see at, even our local levels, some level of stabilization amongst like, cordiality and collaboration amongst our city leadership, and to not simply look like you hate each other. And what I do want to slightly push back on is it's not a matter of personalization of hating each other. I have no beef with many of my council members who often vote contrary or in opposition to many of the measures that either I or some of my colleagues amongst the progressive, coalition, those measures that we bring forward. But what I do think it is important, especially under or in recognizing how we got to this loss, is we do need to clarify where people stand in their relationship to poor people, working class people, to climate change. And it's not about personalization. It's if I bring a measure that says we're trying to raise wages for working class people who are struggling to cover rent, they don't have the means to be able to send their kids to after school programs. And if a simple and outdated minimum wage increase will get them a little bit more to just stabilize their lives, and you think that is too much, that's a political disagreement. And we absolutely should have that in our democracy. And that is, I think, what was the dangers about, in many ways, the Kamala's campaign, is this neutralization of the actual political threats that's confronting our society. As soon as you start welcoming advocates of fascism to be part of your political coalition, but simultaneously framing them as threats to the common good, to our common well-being, that creates some type of like schizophrenic just confusion there around like, is this person a threat? Is this person a foe or a friend? And I think it's important under our current political realities, we do need to make sure people know where folks stand in relationship to, do you actually care that every resident of our community, of our city, regardless of their race, their gender identity, their zip code, is deserving of public housing and shelter, affordable housing? Do you believe they deserve access to clean air and water? And it's incumbent upon us as elected officials to bring proposals and measures forward that makes clear, where do people stand on that? Because what we often see in spaces of City Hall, everyone, like today, we did a kumbaya moment. Actually, I encourage you to watch the press conference around the signing of the HERC closure resolution that passed unanimously amongst council. Mayor Fry hosted a ceremonial signing of that. And it looked like a beautiful moment. I'm glad we can have those moments like that where there is a shared understanding of, okay, we did something right and we did it by coming together. But we also know there's a moment just like several weeks ago, not even several, 2 weeks ago, where we were in complete odds about assessing fees to polluters who are emitting carbon emissions that we know is a key pollutant driving climate change and worsening our climate crisis and emergency. And we were not on the same page about that. So I think we have to have these spaces of disagreement, because if you don't, it makes it seem like we're all on the same team. And that confuses the public. That creates that apathy that you're talking about. And that creates conditions of what we saw nationally, where people think the wrong side is actually the right side and moves towards the right. So I get the craving for kumbaya, but it's also important that we do have these political disagreements to make clear to the public about where your elected officials, where your leadership, who is supposed to be responsible for giving you the resources you need to have thriving and healthy lives. And if they are saying one thing in the public, but their actions are showing otherwise, that gives you space as a resident to then hold them accountable. And we absolutely are going to need that more than ever in the next stage of democracy that we're entering into under, or the lack thereof, under the Trump administration.
So you're telling me you hugged the mayor this morning at a press conference again? I remember you hugging the mayor on TV a couple of months ago.
We did a nice firm handshake. It was good job, okay. Good job, great. And right. Yes, no hugs this time, which I'm sorry, I denied you another opportunity to make a great hug it out video. Yeah. Feel free to clip that along with the handshake. So we added another one.
Yeah, I find as I'm getting older, I want people to get along, and I realize how lame that makes me. And like, we have real disagreements. So I'm not arguing that like we have to forget that we disagree about important things. But let's talk about off-duty fees for police. Does the city now have the ability to do that? Is that what we passed? I'm sorry, I'm foggy on.
No. So as you're aware, this has been a matter that residents have wanted to see their city leadership take on for several years now, and it really came to a lot of public discussion following the shooting and killing of Justine Diamond by Officer Muhammad Noor, I believe back in 2017 or 2018, and they have not seen the city really make any movement. And by they, we're talking about like our constituents, the public, and more so of like just the shocking nature of like, we have city employees who are able to use city resources to subsidize their side hustles, essentially. And we don't see this in any other space of, our city enterprise. And I constantly use this example of like, Public Works can't use Public Works trucks to go fill potholes, once they clock out. So it's this weird racket like that has been pointed out by, the DOJ, MDHR's investigative reports around, like, this is ripe for corruption, and it has been. So we have been told, for at least throughout my term, we were constantly told that we could take limited action or barely no action to rectify this because of a 1997 court injunction that permits the city of that makes it so that the city of Minneapolis cannot prohibit off-duty, programs for first responders, specifically in this case, MPD officers. So we have to allow this to happen per that court injunction. But what we can do is say, if we have to have a program, it needs to be a regulated program. It can't just be something that's like coordinated through pinky promises or like writing on napkins, or maybe no documentation, as we found, between officers. And we know this is having very negative impacts on residents, especially business owners who have to pay these arbitrary fees for, providing themselves with additional safety services that they technically already pay for through taxes. But so my office immediately was like, no, there's got to be more that we can do. And what we learned, especially in having conversations with Chief O'Hara himself, is that we can do a program that assess fees to businesses for the usage of those city resources that officers use while they're participating in off-duty. So that way the city is at least recouping some level of cost or some level of resources that we're outputting, again, to subsidize these side hustles for our cops, our police officers. So that is the measure that we're doing right now, or advancing. The first step that we need to do is to pass enabling legislation and add that to our charter. So I passed a motion asking the city attorneys to provide that language by November 20th. And ideally, once we have that language, we'll pass it. That allows us the ability to collect fees. But then we need to set up the program in order to collect those fees. So we need to evaluate what all expenses needs to be factored into, that program where we're going to recoup costs for. And I mean, what unsurprisingly, these are things that MPD, the administration, has never tracked before. And I asked Chief O'Hara a couple of weeks ago in a committee meeting, like, I know you got money because we allocated it to employ a database to start tracking off-duty hours. So we have a tracking mechanism that should make it easier for us to put this program together. And he shared that actually, no, they're still doing a hybrid model. Things haven't fully rolled out. So it's just like, oh my God. So we also passed a motion to say, go create the program, go use your $200 and something million budget to and hundreds of staff positions, especially data analysts, to go finally track how you're assessing costs or the related costs of off-duty. If we can do this for buyback programs, we should be able to do the same thing or create the same type of programmatic infrastructure for off-duty. And there's no excuse. So ideally, by early next year, we will have the enabling legislation put in place, and then we'll be able to have a programmatic framework so that we can add these fees to the 2026 fee schedule, so we can actually start recuperating, again, some resources and dollars for the cost of this program.
So a related question, I hear a lot about how expensive it is to people put on events that require police protection and like paying for off-duty cops to come, do security at your events, kind of expensive. Somebody told me they talked to someone at the Uptown Association, which is the organization that puts on the Uptown Art Fair, about how if they had held it in Uptown this year, which they didn't, it would have been some ungodly high amount of money to pay for police. But they held it in the Bachman's parking lot in like deep South Minneapolis. And they were able to get by with just 2 security guards. I don't understand why it was possible to put on the event with just 2 security guards, assuming I've been told correctly, in that location, as opposed to needing lots of police in Uptown. But I've heard people complain about off-duty fees as if, well, this is going to make it more expensive to put on events. So one, is that true? And 2, how do we help people put on events how do we make it possible for people to put on events and not have it break their budget?
No, you're absolutely right. And those are anecdotal stories we've heard throughout the years in terms of, again, officers participating in off duty have the ability to set their own, rates. So we don't get to have a say in that as a city of, are you charging, business entities who are soliciting these services $100 per hour, $300 per hour, like they get to set their own price essentially. And we know they're not setting cheap prices. And I think because you're seeing, larger corporations like Target, participate in using off-duty services, I can imagine that helps to set like officers going rates that they then also probably flatline out to other smaller businesses. So we know, again, it's just something that requires so much regulation, and it has just gone without tracking for many, many years. But we have absolutely heard about the financial burden it puts on businesses who are simply trying to provide safety services for their customers, or even, like you said, large scale events. I heard something similar around the Pride, event too, around like them having to factor in the cost of off duty. And this is where I think, where we have the ability to get creative, and this is something that my office is going to be looking into, is revisiting the safety plans that's associated with, licensing large scale events, as we do like with, business licensing, like they're supposed to provide, their own safety plans as well. And can we basically have those safety plans reflect our new model of public safety, where you can invite safety ambassadors to also be part of providing security? We're seeing that with Warehouse District Live, which I know you have extensively covered, where they're not using just, traditional law enforcement. They have brought in safety ambassadors or violence interrupters, a variety of non-armed safety professionals to, again, ensure safety for those events. And I know a couple years ago, even the Somali Independence Festival was able to partner with, I believe at the time, the Minnesota Peace Force, Minnesota Nonviolent Peace Force, to provide security for their events. And they're, again, non-armed safety professionals. So we know there's a model in which we can bring in our non-armed safety professionals to provide safety in these spaces. Why are we only acting as if law enforcement is the only option for that? So I am absolutely interested to see how are we able to reconfigure those safety plans for large scale events, because it's wild that, like, the idea that these great events that's bringing social cohesion, bringing in community, which enhances safety in itself when people feel like they are getting to know their neighbors. There's activity in a particular neighborhood. There's economic, engagement and activity that's happening. These are all things that encourages safety, but we're not able to support them because people are going to go financially bankrupt because they got to pay like 3 officers. They're going rate. Like, that's problematic, and absolutely it's just like unacceptable. So you're spot on, and that's something that we're going to be looking into as we're looking at regulating a formal off-duty program as well.
So I don't know if you've heard, council member, but I have an event, the Wedge Live Cat Tour, and the ratio of staff to attendees is like 1 to 500. I am the only person who puts it on, and we draw 500 people. And I'm feeling a little nervous because I don't fill out any paperwork. I don't get permission. It just kind of happens. And so please don't report me to regulatory services.
I think you kind of just reported yourself, John. Like,
no, nobody report me. If you've gotten to this point in the podcast, you're a friend and you won't report me.
That was signed in a contract prior, by the way, in coming on today. John made that clear.
Yes. I was also honored. I don't know if you saw this, Councilmember Wonsley, but I was honored with a resolution during a council meeting for National Cat Day.
You were, and we got to see Sir Rupert as well was honored. Taylor, shout out to Taylor. Her beautiful feline king was also honored that beautiful day.
Rupert is a very large and very calm, well-behaved cat that you can bring to a council meeting.
Right. I was very surprised, which I would say maybe you should I would say you should count those as part of your security for the Wedge Live cat tours, because cats do not play as well. They will throw paws in a quick moment, and they will protect their owners or they might eat them depending on the day. But yes, Rupert set like the expectations for like, I wish all cats could be like this.
Do you have any hot gossip? Can you tell us who you're supporting for mayor? Do you have any inkling of that? Do you have secret candidates you would like to out who are on the way? Anything you can tell us?
What I will say is I'm very excited about us likely having a variety of viable and strong contenders, and who will offer Minneapolis a vision on how we move forward, and in a way that you mentioned earlier, together, and one that brings both council along in a process, our residents along in a process, as opposed to continuing on what we've experienced, where everything just feels like a fight. Like we're fighting for no reason most times, especially when we're saying publicly we're in agreement with things. And then when things are brought forward that supports that agreement, it somehow turns into a veto. So I'm really excited about, the political diversity that we're going to see. There might be a chance for us to experience what New York is having, where, maybe someone who also believes in a socialist praxis is going to be also or considering entering the race. And as a socialist, I'm so excited about that, and the ability to counter this extremist and very dangerous messaging that political PACs like all of Minneapolis are advancing to try to equate people like myself, like Councilmember Chavez, Council Vice President Chucktie, people who are out here literally saying, maybe we should clear sidewalks so people don't hurt themselves because, we get snow and ice here. Or maybe everyone should have housing and not sleep on the streets. Somehow we're the dangerous threats to society. And I'm glad that we will possibly have someone on the mayoral, stage countering that messaging and offering, as we've been doing, a positive vision on how we move forward as a city. Because for the past almost 6 years, it feels like it's a dark cloud. We've been in the shadow of darkness and have been prevented from reaching our fullest possibilities or potential as a city because of the particular leadership that we have had to endure under on the executive side. And because we have a number of, conservative forces in our city who wants to hold us to the status quo. So I'm very, very hopeful that we're going to have some mayoral candidates who are going to say, no, we don't have to settle for that. We do not have to settle, and we can't. We've been there. We've been there for several years now. How has that worked out for us? We cannot stay here, especially under a Trump presidency. We absolutely cannot stay here. We need a vision that's going to center everyday Minneapolis residents and bring everyone along in that process, and acknowledge, are we going to have disagreements on how we get to our shared goal and the shared vision? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop. We're going to still move forward.
Yeah, I've been amused that all of Minneapolis has included the DSA in all of their emails. They coined the phrase DSA Council Majority, and I was interested to see that Emily Koski joined the DSA Council Majority recently, and so they had to reframe it as the Do Nothing Council Majority, because it seems ridiculous to have Emily Koski and all the other non-DSA members included in that. And then Carol Becker wrote an attack of socialism, and she started, I think she mentioned horrible dictatorships. She probably started with that. And then when she got to talking about actual socialists in Minneapolis, she started criticizing workplace regulations, and I forget what her other, it was all things that are probably popular across the spectrum. Really, we have a problem with minimum wages now. Yeah.
And that is where it's just you have literally left the land of sanity at this point, where one, yes, like I'm glad we're somehow building our ranks. I think I will take, credit for sending Councilmember Koski the DSA join link. Like personally, I'll take that. Like, yes, Comrade Koski. No, let me stop. No, but like it's so weird to see these emails, especially as someone who's constantly like referenced in them of this havoc that we're apparently just like waging within the city, and that we're also we're creating all this chaos, but somehow we're also doing absolutely nothing. And it's just like, how do you reconcile those two realities, especially when we have like, our clerk noting the fact and acknowledging the fact that this is one of the most productive legislative bodies that has, moved through the tenure of governance in our city. And I am proud of that, because every single one of my colleagues know that we have to serve in these positions. We have to serve our residents, and we need to meet their needs. And we find every single ways, in spite of the unnecessary opposition that we're often experiencing, to meet the needs of our constituents. So I'm very proud that we continue to be productive and we show up for our most everyday constituent who needs help with a pothole or a sidewalk, to our residents who've experienced, gross disparities and trauma, and especially in light of the shooting or attempted murder of our own resident, Davis Maturi. So I'm glad that we have a body who actually cares about everyday people. And for some reason, that just makes political entities like all of Minneapolis and their affiliates want to throw up. Or it just like really disturbs them spiritually. And instead of just saying the quiet part out loud, we hate poor people. We hate we hate poor people. We hate the fact that you're doing things to actually address the material issues that creates people having to sleep outside, that creates the conditions for climate change and the warming of our or the pollution of our air quality. No, we're just going to say you are dangerous, folks. And we're going to just not talk about our disdain for actually wanting to help our most marginalized and most struggling residents. We're going to ignore that and just try to demonize and criminalize you and make you the problem, because you're actually trying to do things and provide solutions.
So before we let you go, do you have any recommendations, things you're enjoying that you think other people should try out?
Oh, shout out. I love Zumba. Zumba is so great. Dancing movement.
So you made this recommendation the last time you were here.
Oh, I'm a Zumba.
Should we do a new one?
A new one? I'm sorry. I have my anchor points. I'm very simple. Okay, concerts. I will name Minneapolis, which, shout out to Meet Minneapolis. I guess, you all have been bringing or creating conditions for very great talent to come into the city. Like I had the opportunity to go see Usher. I know my council colleague, Vital, was like out in the front too, very jealous of her. She got to I basically touch Usher. Like I love our concerts. I love our music scene. We have a great theater scene as well. So go check out any play that's happening along the theaters on Hennepin. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Also, I love food. We have really good food in the city too. People try to clown us on that, but our food game is top notch here. So I love going to my regular spots in Ward 2, of course, but Sober Fish, shout out to Ward 6, Cafe Racer. But I love also being able to go to a brewery in North Loop, and thank God more breweries are including more food options. So love that part. But I find I have to have my anchor points throughout the week. And I am glad that I live in a city where we do have literally something to do for everyone, regardless of what your interests are. We have a cat tour, for Christ's sake. How cooler of a city can you get? I'm from Chicago, actual major city, and we don't have a cat tour.
It's true.
Never. So I'm so glad that we have a city that is able to have all these different type of businesses and activities that caters to such a variety of interests and hobbies that actually helps to bring us together in very creative and beautiful ways as like a collective community.
Well, thank you for talking to me. I feel better after talking to you. Thank you for being my unpaid therapist here.
I will send you an invoice. Who says unpaid? I'll send an invoice real quick.
Okay. Right. Councilmember Robin Wonsley represents Ward 2 on the Minneapolis City Council. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.